Hello everybody, this is Ian here, and welcome back to another Doctor Who review. So, here I am. It's long overdue, but I'm finally doing my full review for the Monk 3-parter. So, overall, I have to say that I found this story somewhat underwhelming, with the strongest part definitely being the middle one, the pyramid at the end of the world, as it was the only one that I felt had a solid structure. The first part, Extremis, is really weird because it barely connects to the other two and really should have been a standalone. It was really the mission to the unknown of the modern series. Now, I went into more detail of my problems with Extremis in my review of it, but suffice to say that my general opinion on it is that although it had a really good concept, the dueling story arcs of the Veritas and the Vault ended up being extremely jarring and made the entire narrative feel somewhat disjointed. Meanwhile, the third and final episode, The Lie of the Land, while also having good concepts, was way too ambitious, and tried to do a TV series' worth of material in one 45-minute episode, which meant that it inevitably wound up being extremely rushed and having a very weak ending. Now, the obvious solution to this problem is to cut out Extremis, as it isn't really necessary, and give that slot to The Lie of the Land instead. But I think that what this really was Moffat having a really good idea for an episode he wanted to write but couldn't find anywhere to put it, so he just crammed it onto the 3-parter, which is what I think ultimately sunk it. Now, that's not to say that the whole thing was bad. It definitely had a lot of great qualities to it, but I'm just saying that on a whole, it didn't quite stack up to other stories. I mean, I don't really have a lot to say on this, as I basically made most of my critiques in my individual reviews, which I'll put in the description, but basically, the 3-parter had some solid writing, good concepts, and some good villains, although I don't think the monks were utilized to their full extent, and I would have liked to have learned more about them, like where they came from and why they wanted the Earth. I know that a lot of times less is more, and I've said this a lot, like in Midnight and The Impossible Planet, but it just wasn't really the case in this story. Now, it would have been if they had cut out the last 2 parts and just kept Extremis, because you would have had freaky corpse monsters making an extremely detailed facsimile of the Earth as a simulation for some reason. Some unknown, but undoubtedly malevolent reason. That would have been really creepy if Extremis had been a standalone and they didn't actually explain what the monks wanted in that context. But in the overall context of the story, I really would have liked to learn a little more about the monks. My other major problem with this story outside of the pacing, though, is the resolution, which I touched on in my review for The Lie of the Land, but I will go into more detail on here. It was a weak ending, basically the ending that has become very stereotypically Moffat, where he can't really think of any satisfactory way to resolve the story in the time he has, so he just throws something in there and says it works. So, you've got the monks feeding fake history into the minds of every human on Earth, so the Doctor says he's going to override that history and reinstate the proper course of events by tapping into the neural feed or whatever. Okay, that makes sense. The Doctor fails, though, and so Bill, being the linchpin or whatever, I never really understood exactly how that worked, but I got the general principle, has to do it herself, even though it will kill her. Alright, that makes sense, too. What doesn't make sense was why Bill's mom can save the day just by Bill thinking about her. The Doctor says it has something to do with a window to the world before the monks, but that doesn't make sense because that's exactly what they tried to do before, and that didn't work then, so there's no reason why Bill thinking of her mom should work. The Doctor also mentioned something about unconditional love, so yes, the day was saved by the power of love. Again, as Stephen Moffat has done many times before. But there's a big difference between a genuinely heartfelt ending and a needlessly mushy ending. But yeah, as a whole, I'd give the Monk 3-parter an overall 6 out of 10 compared to other Doctor Who stories due to its poor ending and overall abysmal pacing and structure, but I will give it a 7 out of 10 on enjoyability, so that's a bit better.